Hi, I'm Dr. B.G. Mancini, head of the Brain Gut Institute, and welcome to our introductory course. I've been working with babies, children, adults, and families for over 20 years, and this is to bring you some of the essential tools that work with babies' brains to build them and make them feel more resilient. Also going to look at food sensitivities and what they really look like. In addition, we're going to address some of the warning signs that you can keep your eye out for. Because in this case, if you see something and say something and are not being heard, it is important to take the next step. Hopefully what this course will give you, and then our Childhood Essentials course, which comes next, is some of the right questions to be asking to be able to get to the right answers to help your children develop. Finally, we're also going to talk a little bit about our nervous systems and how children's nervous systems are developing, and how that foundation is going to set a lifetime of resilience for them if we do it properly. So welcome to the course, and let's get going. Frequency, intensity, and duration is the key to everything. That means repetition and doing it as often as you can for as long as you can. That baby still stays happy. Remember to do everything with a smile. Give baby lots of praise, lots of hugs, because they will appreciate this time together. And in addition, it's going to be doing wonderful things for their brain and bodies. So please consider using these simple exercises. I am here to help and guide you. I hope you'll join me in the next course that we're going to provide. It's going to not only give you a more in-depth understanding of so many other easy tips and tools to use, but what things to avoid that could be potentially creating problems for the baby and for learning development. We're going to get a little bit more into some of the ways that you can guide their learning so that you can exponentially increase the ease at which they're going to learn. First, I want to let you know that there is no such thing as doing any of these things wrong. This is going to be an exercise in bonding with the child, your baby, and also to allow yourself to know that you are doing the very best for helping baby develop. Now, everyone takes for granted, well, no matter what happens, the baby's brain is going to develop. They're eventually going to crawl, they'll talk, they'll be able to digest their food, they'll be able to communicate with the world, they'll go to school and learn, and everything's going to be fine. And really, that might have been true 30 years ago. However, with the stressors of the environment, the world, our parental stress that they feel, the chemicals they're exposed to, and the more likely that they're going to be in what's called a bucket, right? Any kind of seat or swing or carrier that people leave their children in sometimes, the less mobility that they're having. And all of these things create a situation where the baby's pathways are not developing like they used to. So we want to use the tools and the conversations that we're talking about in this video to enable these pathways to have the optimal ability to develop for happier nervous systems, happier families. I couldn't begin to think about doing this course without talking about co-regulation. The polyvagal theory from Dr. Porges talks about the different states that we move through throughout the day. There is the open and excited engaged. There is when we are in fight and flight, which is really where a lot of people's nervous systems are today, a constant state of PTSD, stress, and fight and flight. And then there's dorsal, where we just shut down. Now, of course, it would be great if we could all remain open, engaged in this parasympathetic state all the time, but that's not realistic, and it's probably not healthy anyway. However, you know those moments when you're bonding with baby or child and you feel really warm and fuzzy, you see you're connected. So the baby's nervous system is going to always meet you where you are. If we're allowing ourselves to stay in fight and flight without being aware of the other state that we can start to move into, the baby will stay in fight and flight too. They will not be able to connect as well. And this actually has long-term neurological effects. It can affect their learning ability. It can affect different milestone meeting. So we really want to consider creating as many opportunities for ourselves to feel calm, because that allows the baby's own nervous system to find ours in that place. I want to talk a little bit about autism, ADHD, spectrum processing disorder, learning delays, and milestones. Now, the goal of all of the exercises and tips that I talk about in this mini course, The purpose is to help each child to reach whatever their own potential is. So if you are the family, parents, mom of someone who has already received a diagnosis, all of these exercises and tips apply to your child. So you might see in the course that I'm talking about babies, but having worked with the autistic community for over 15 years, I can tell you that these are the tools we use to help reconnect their brains and bodies. So when we're using the sensory pathways, we're working with their own neuroplasticity. And that's amazing because it's a way of healing for them from the inside out. Now, milestones, the purpose is not to say, yes, my child walked at this age, yes, they can do this. The purpose is to make sure that each human being, no matter what age they are, has the most ability for themselves to connect deeply with themselves, with their families, and socially engage around them. So how can you feel that you can connect when your brain and body are on fire? What if your brain and body are on fire because you're having food sensitivities? What if things are not allowing you to sleep through the night because you're uncomfortable, because neurologically something is not communicating properly? So really, when we talk about milestones in this course, when I talk about milestones in this course, the goal is to allow every child to reach their own potential. And if your child can crawl and have the ability to move when they're 3 months old, then give them that opportunity. It is a wonderful experience. So whether you are the parent of a child who is neurotypical, is neurodivergent, all of the things that I'm talking about in this mini course apply. Babies and children's brains require input, and what they do with this input is create new pathways. These pathways are the foundation for all movement and learning as they continue to grow. So why not use their sensory pathways, the visual system, the auditory system, taste, sense of smell and touch, to give them more information to build those pathways. They are slates just waiting to be written on. We can also use the vestibular system, which is why I talk about rocking and rolling the baby when they're a little bit older and have head control. Spinning them gently, having them in swings is great. This is going to make them so much more comfortable to explore their surroundings. We have interoception, which is the way that they feel inside and sensing their own cues. Many parents will tell you that they can recognize a different cry for each thing that the baby needs. That is the way that the baby can, at that age, communicate what their needs are and are in touch with what they're feeling. And finally, we have neuroception, and that means creating a safe environment, not only physically, but also creating regulated nervous systems for the baby to be around. And all of this is going to be able to give the baby the best start, the foundation for all of their mobility, for all of their learning, for speech patterns, for reading, and all of the things that we hope that they can do in the future. Now, if your child is already facing challenges, these are also going to be the pathway to wellness. They are needed to give the baby's brain alternative pathways around wherever that injury might be, whether it's from a cord birth injury, a premature birth, or any other type of injury. And we'll talk more about that in the Advanced Childhood Essentials. We're going to move on now to warning signs that you can be aware of that your doctor may not be looking for. Food sensitivities, lack of bilateral movement, which means the child's not using their hands, legs, arms, face even, in an equal way. So if they're favoring one side, they're not moving one leg when they're attempting to creep or crawl, these are warning signs that there is a lack of hemispheric integration, which means both sides of the brains are not communicating with each other. And all of the exercises that we talked about before will help to correct this and help to move them past this resistance. In addition, we're going to look at low tone and midline defects. If you have food sensitivities, there is a very high likelihood that your child does as well. If you don't have food sensitivities, but your child has diarrhea, constipation, any type of repeated ear infection, throat infection, pain after eating, lots of belly distension, any of these things, eczema is another big one, then this can be food sensitivities. Now, your pediatrician may not mention that gluten and dairy, pea protein, soy, and corn can be causing these, but they can. And if you don't find out, then those foundational issues are going to grow with your child. So please consider looking at an IgG, IgM food test for sensitivities, not allergens. Because if you go to an allergist, they're not going to be looking at the overall inflammation that these foods can be creating. Bilateral movement is a way that you can see if your baby's hemispheres of the brain are integrating and communicating effectively. If you notice that the baby is favoring one hand over the other, or that one leg is not moving when they're in tummy time, what you can do is just implement the exercises we've already talked about with more frequency. Frequency, intensity, and duration is going to be the key to getting those hemispheres to communicate. And you will know it's working because they will start to use the non-favored hand or the non-favored leg more frequently, and then continue doing it, and you will know that the integration is working. Understanding low tone is really important for your baby's development. And if you look at, let's say 2 months is when a baby can typically hold their own head, and 4 months is when a baby can push themselves up on the floor. If your child is not meeting these milestones, it's integral to have them on the floor as much as possible in tummy time, because we want to give them the opportunity to overcome the low tone that they might have. So babies are meant to be squishy, and that is wonderful. But if you feel your baby is a little bit loose and lax in their movements, then it might be an issue of low tone. Now, while this can be a mitochondrial issue, or this can be a matter of neurotransmitters needing to be picked up, it's usually going to be a combination of not enough time on the floor and also these other components. So if low tone is a warning sign for your child, and you don't notice things start to pick up when you are doing more of these frequency, intensity, and duration exercises, please consider getting them checked for something like a mitochondrial deficiency, or you can also look at glutathione levels, because often when these are implemented, they can immediately pick up baby tones. So you'll need to work with a functional practitioner to find this out, but it's very important that by 6 months we have overcome the low tone issue, or else it will cause future developmental delays. Looking at tongue and lip ties is really important, not just for latching and being able to start verbal communication. However, it's also to allow the restriction that can be caused all the way down the throat and into the back of the neck. So my own son had a lip and tongue tie, only nobody was acknowledging this. So I could see that it was intersecting at the gum in the front and underneath. Now, one thing that we had to do was take him both to 2 pediatricians and then to the actual person who was going to do the laser snip. When I took him to the specialist, he said, "Wow, you must not even have been able to breastfeed with such a severe lip and tongue tie." Now, fortunately, I was able to, but the 2 pediatricians I showed this to prior did not even recognize it as one. And I can tell you that the minute we had it snipped, that night, I could hear him in his crib, awake for hours for the first time, singing, making movements with his tongue that he was not able to make before. And this was only at about 3 or 4 months. So please do, if you think that there's a connection between the lip and tongue tie, your latch, or even taking a look and becoming a tongue tie expert yourself on YouTube, you may find something that's going to help your baby long term. When we talk about the auditory system, the baby is listening to everything you say long before they are able to verbally speak and communicate. So we want to use this opportunity to talk about everything with our children. When we carry them around, when they're resting somewhere, when we're outside, when we're doing any of the exercises mentioned in this video, whether you're touching with certain textures, let's say with feathers or with cotton balls, as we talk about for the tactile, you want to say feather or cotton ball or touch, mom, right? And as you go from room to room, refrigerator, bed, and give them that auditory stimulation. Now, one thing that we talk about a lot is the bonding of the mother's voice. There's something called the prosody of our voice as it lilts up and down. And this is something that babies and children are very attuned to. So are our animals, right? We speak to them with a very lilting voice. This feeds cues of safety to the baby's nervous system. So please consider using the auditory pathways of our children, which helps to develop their brain by speaking to them with smiles and cues of safety, by expressing yourself and communicating about everything throughout the day, no matter where the baby is going. And even if you don't think they understand, it is actually communicating to their brain. The other thing that you can do when babies are very little even, you can take 2 blocks from a safe distance and slap them together like this. What that's going to do the first time, it may not cause them to even look. The second time you make that noise, you may get them to turn. This is literally watching your baby's auditory pathway develop, because this is helping their survival instinct. We are meant to turn towards loud or deep growling sounds, right? That is part of how we survive. So this is creating a safety mechanism for our children. I want to talk about cross-patterning and how important this is for our children and for adults even with brain injuries. And I mention that only because they have been using this technique at the Institute for the Achievement of Human Potential in Philadelphia for over 40 years. I learned about their technique about 30 years ago when my niece had been diagnosed with a brain injury at birth. And I watched my aunt use cross-patterning and other tools I'm going to talk about in this course to help rehabilitate her brain, and she made a full recovery. Cross-patterning is anything that babies do where they're crossing over midline. So when baby's on the changing table, take advantage of that time and take their right hand and bring their left foot together and then switch and do the other side. You can do this all day long when you don't know what else to do with your baby. The other thing you can do is when they're able to reach for things, you want to put things just out of reach with one hand and sort of hold the other one to make them cross over the midline of their body. You have plenty of opportunities when babies are young to use this to make those pathways in the brain, and this will help them to get moving. The sooner babies get moving and crawling, the more advanced their protection mechanisms, for instance, how to get out of tricky situations and survival, will develop. So babies who skip crawling can actually be repatterned. If you are already past this point, we use crawling as a technique to help recover some of the neural pathways that were skipped. And this can be really helpful in calming ADHD brains and several other things that we'll talk about more in the next course. The olfactory or sense of smell is one of the senses that connects us deepest to our memories. Taking advantage of this when they are young is a great way to develop their palate. So you talk about picky eaters, which is something we all want to avoid, right? So what you can do is use different scents, different foods, essential oils, all from a safe distance, because babies have very sensitive senses of smell, right? So you could put a drop of essential oil and keep it at a safe distance and name what it is. So you can keep stimulating their olfactory sense, which is deeply connected to taste. And research has shown that this can actually develop more adventurous eaters. Proprioception is something that's not often talked about and is super important for developing a sense of our bodies. So proprioception can be developed by applying gentle pressure and baby massage, by pushing gently on joints like this and manipulating the body a little bit. What this is going to do is give them an internal map of their body. This is going to help them when they start to move, as they're creeping and crawling, and also when they're standing. So really important, even things like, the baby's palmar reflex will cause them to grip and not let go up until a certain age. So you can take advantage of that by letting them hold your finger and wrapping your hand securely around theirs and allowing them to just pull. That weight on their hands, their arms, their sense of developing their movement will be really good. You can also allow them to have something to kick. So as they're laying down, give them a kick mat so they're getting a sense of proprioception in their feet and their ankles and their legs. When we talk about our tactile and touch system, one of the things we want to think about, especially for young babies and children, is to give them as much skin-to-skin contact time as possible. We have a microbiome essentially on our skin as well, and babies will accumulate that from the people that they're going on skin-to-skin contact with. So please consider that whenever you have some time with the baby alone, to keep them on both mom, dad, or whoever their primary caretaker is that can hold them safely and give them that opportunity to develop a healthier skin system. The other thing is we want to provide different touch systems for their hands, their feet, so give them opportunities to feel different textures, to put different textures against their skin. This will help them to not be picky about the things that they're playing with and touching later in life. As we've all had some experiences, I've seen kids go down on grass and their feet spring up like cats in water. Some kids don't like sand. Some kids don't like certain textures on their skin. But when you develop this sense of tactile touch early in life, this will reduce the chance that that is happening. In addition, you are stimulating the pathways for them to seek out certain stimulus when they're playing, and that will make them more adventurous. Tummy time is so critical, not just because it's going to increase the oxygen in the baby's lungs and in their brain, build very important muscles, get them moving faster, which reduces their own frustration, but if they're not on their tummy, they're on their back. And when they're on their back, that is creating undue stress on the back of their skulls, and so many babies are ending up in the helmets now. Well, the helmets don't just shift the baby's cranium so that the alignment looks better, but it's also putting undue stress on their jaws, their digestion, their throat, their swallowing. So all of the bucket seats, the swings, and the things that give parents some breaks on what to do with their children is actually creating a different problem. So we encourage you to keep them out of those seats as often as possible, keep them on their tummies, get down there with them because they're going to be so happy to see your face. So get down there, congratulate them for being there, do short bursts so that they don't get super frustrated, and try doing it on a sliding surface because babies want to move. If you put your hands behind a baby's foot, they will start to push off. So the reason that this is so exciting is because they can actually crawl and move their bodies much earlier than people suspect. They won't be able to do it on carpet, so consider putting either a towel down on a floor or just putting them right on the floor in simple, maybe a onesie, pants if they need it, but definitely no socks or they're not going to get any traction, and that will be very frustrating. In addition, in the resources section, we'll put a little bit about Glenn Doman's crawling track. That's what I used with my kids. Gives them something to push off of, and they get super happy about getting some momentum and being able to move their bodies. Our vestibular system begins in the womb when we are floating in amniotic fluid and our body is orienting to where we are. Now, when we come out and we are landlocked, so to speak, we need to give babies' vestibular pathways the opportunity to develop. It is not something that's going to develop on its own if they do not have mobility access. So taking baby on a safe pillow on the ground and rocking them gently, when we're holding them, making circles ourselves and spinning slowly and rocking, rolling, spinning, anything you can do with the baby. When the baby has their head writing ability, having them do little log rolls, 1, 2, 3 in both directions, or having them in their car seat even, and just rotating it 2 or 3 times and then the other direction. And always start counterclockwise. Now, I'll get into that reason for doing it that way in the next course. However, our vestibular system as we age becomes stiff and non-resilient. So if you try and make a spin without baby in your hands and you get a little dizzy or nauseated, you're going to find that that actually means your vestibular system is suffering from either stiffness or lack of development. And you want to actually practice that for yourself. That's going to create a healthy system so that when we get older, we do not have a higher likelihood of falling. So consider practicing that for yourselves, and definitely to help develop the baby's vestibular system, which will decrease the likelihood of car sickness and motion sickness and a sense of feeling unsafe as they're moving through the world. Because even when kids are doing normal healthy play in a playground or other types of climbing and jumping, if they have an underdeveloped vestibular system, they are going to be the child who sits down and doesn't want to engage in these activities because they are not feeling safe in their nervous system as they travel through space and time, which is what the vestibular system gives us. Our visual system is actually the ability for our brain to interpret the information coming in through our eyes. A lot of times parents will say, well, I've had my child's eyes checked. However, the doctor said he had 20/20 vision. And the problem is really that the brain is not interpreting the information and the images coming in a way that makes sense. That is called our visual pathway. It is amazing if you can start doing some of these exercises with children and babies. You can even carry baby into a closet or dark room, have the lights off, and then say, lights on, and turn the light switch on. Then lights off, lights on, lights off. This is going to help to develop their visual system very early on. In addition, what you're going to find is in the beginning, babies only have about 5% of the vision that they're going to have as an adult. What can we do to make them feel more comfortable and oriented in their new environment? One of the best things we can do is to use what are called high contrast environments. So you can buy cards and posters and mobiles that are going to have bright backgrounds, so white with black images, white with red images, and that is going to give the baby the ability to actually see. One of the first things that they know is the outline of mom and caretaker's faces. The next thing that we want them to be able to see is a little bit further away, and those high contrast cards are going to allow them to do that. Hi everyone, and welcome to the end of the Childhood Essentials mini course. I hope that you enjoyed it and that you took away some tips and tools that are going to be helpful for you with your own children. Coming up next is our Childhood Essentials Masterclass, and I want to talk a little bit about why I created it. Because children don't come with a manual, I have put together 25 years of my experience and interviews with professionals in every field that I find relevant for helping children to advance and to recover from diagnosis they may have been given. So I'm going to go through retained reflexes, which if you Google them, if you're not sure what they are, take a look at what they can cause. And it might be that you look and say, that is my child, but I've never even heard of this, so how can it be that important? I'm going to explain step by step how to assess for this in just a few minutes, how to integrate them so they no longer are affecting your child in just a few minutes a day. I'm also going to give you my step-by-step assessment form that I use for all milestones with children, not the newly updated ones that were changed last year, but the ones that for 40 years since it was created, they have been able to meet. And again, the reason for meeting milestones is just to say that the pathways that we are aware those milestones contribute to have been established. And again, you can always go back and make a joyful and fun way of crawling or skipping or jumping with 2 feet. Also, I'm going to include a whole section on what I use in triage care. So in other words, the ear infections, the eye dyes, the digestive troubles, the colic, the diarrhea, constipation, and all the other things that inevitably happen under the age of, let's say, 6. And if you're nodding, then you've definitely been through it. So I'm going to tell you all of the things that I have used successfully in my clinic with children of those ages, and you can have them at home. If you're the mom of a newborn or a 1-year-old and you're already experiencing some of these things, I'm going to give you a list that you can collect and feel more prepared at home. The goal of the Childhood Essentials Masterclass is to empower families to have more in-depth control and vision on what they're seeing with their children's development, their overall health, and finally, we're going to talk a lot more about nutrition and what it is that when it looks like there's going to be a food sensitivity and how we can handle those things. So these are going to be the hidden signs that are not being talked about by your pediatrician, unfortunately, because they just weren't trained. But we want to invite all of the pediatricians to take this course too, because we feel it's so important that anyone who is working with children are aware of what these hidden, missed opportunities are for kids. So thank you again, and I look forward to seeing you there.